American League championship. I don't believe it. It just continues. My, oh my.
High fly ball into right field. She is gone.
Oh, drives one. Right field. Did he do it? He did. Are you kidding me? Let's go.
Now we're back after a long week of watching baseball at the major league, minor league, college levels. Everything is in swing. Summer is near. And Joe Doyle is back. Jason Churchill, Joe Doyle. It's the FSS Plus podcast. Joe, in your absence, where you were off on an unauthorized vacation, by the way, because I think that's all you take is unauthorized vacation, because you don't need my authorization. So it's unauthorized. We talked a little bit about, I bagged on the Chicago White Sox for like an hour, and you know what? People loved it. So I'm going to make that a usual thing. If you're ever out, I'm going to pick a team to pick on, but here's what I want to do. The next time you're out, I'm going to ask you, all right, you're going to be out for the show. Which team should I pick on this week? And then you just throw a random team at me. It could be the best team in base. Pick on the Dodgers, and I will find a reason to just bag on them for like 45 minutes.
I like that. Yeah. Anybody in the industry that I talk to that slights me just even once, I'll just blacklist them through church.
Yeah, there you go. Absolutely. I would just rip them to shreds. That's what we do.
I like
here.
that. That's leverage.
Here's what we're going to talk about this week. You have a mock draft out that just popped on Wednesday. And so we're going to go through that a little bit because it's a really interesting, I don't want to say change at the top, although technically it is from your first mock. Because I think people expect the top two picks to be pretty much consensus across the board. And you introduced a potential scenario that generates some discussion. So we're going to get to that. Then we're going to do a live mock where I'm going to throw another wrench into it all, really, really high in the draft. And we'll riff off that a little bit. And then later in the show, I want to get your take, Joe, on who flinches first from a contender standpoint and a non-contender seller at the deadline standpoint when it comes to trades. I know fans love to talk trades. I think it's going to be a big summer for trades, but I think there are going to be fewer trades and bigger names moved this summer, and I'll explain why as we get closer to the deadline. But, that, by the way, the Chicago White Sox that I spent an hour last week ripping on might be one of those teams that flinch and say, screw it, we need to start over. Let's start trading dudes. But I'll get your take on that a little later in the show. But let's talk about your mock draft. First, before we dig into every pick, at least the top 10, we'll go through the top 10. Any thought at the top of Dylan Cruz not being the pick by the Pirates? I'm not hearing anything like that, but you're a little closer to this than I am. Is there any the closest thing I've heard to Dylan Cruz not going number one is the Nationals trying to do everything they possibly can to talk the Pirates out of it and to talk Dylan Cruz from not talking to the Pirates, which doesn't seem like there's much of a chance that happens.
I mean, I would still be stunned. Pittsburgh, they did the whole money games thing with Henry Davis in 2021, but there was not a consensus top player in that draft. I mean, most people would say it was actually kind of a weaker draft, especially on the college side. So I'm not hearing anything that anyone except Dylan Cruz is going to go first overall. I think there are some scenarios where Wyatt Langford is willing to take a big haircut and Pirates would like to kind of flex their bonus pool a little bit. But, at the end of the day, man, the MLB draft is a money game. Like money in this draft, money in every draft might be more important than the talent that is involved in it. So there's a long ways to go until the draft. I still think some things can happen, but as of today, I just think you'd be silly to bet against Cruz.
Yeah, what's interesting is in the Cleveland scouting director years ago, he told me, and I've repeated this 1,000 times, but it still rings in my head every time I think about the bonus pool. And I don't really love the fact that we have bonus pools, but he said, hey, the draft is different now than it was prior to 2011, I think was the first year. It used to just be able to take best player on the board. And whatever that guy's number was the number he came up with. And now it's not quite as easy, but you have to keep one eye on your player board and one eye on your money. Because the guy on your player board, if he's number one, but he's 10 on your money board because of the money you have available. If you're the Texas Rangers, for example, you can't just take the best player every single round. You got to move that around. So it's really interesting. So Dylan Cruz 1. You do have Dylan Cruz 1 in your mock. And then at number 2, I think right now, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, the expectation, if there was one, at least from the public, from analysts, from other outlets, is that the Washington Nationals are going to take LSU right-hander Paul Skenes with the number 2 pick. But in this particular scenario, and that's what mock drafts are, let's present some potential scenarios. You have Walker Jenkins, the South Brunswick outfielder, going to the Nationals, and this pushes Skenes and Wyatt Langford, maybe some other guys down the list, 1 or 2 spots. This is really interesting. So what went into putting attaching Jenkins to the Nationals at number 2 here?
Well, this is an industry and rumor mock draft, and it's basically what is the latest thing, what is the most interesting thing that I have been hearing, I have been seeing inside of team circles, league circles, and I mean the Nationals have been out heavy-handed to see Walker Jenkins. There's been multiple folks from different levels of scouting and player development out to see him. They're obviously doing their due diligence. Now, Jason, I have so many Nationals fans so angry at me right now. I have had so many Nationals fans in my mentions this week lambasting me for making this pick. But at the end of the day, like, it's just a mock draft, and I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but I am saying this is a scenario that could happen. Do I think Paul Skenes makes more sense for the Washington Nationals, who currently have like 9 outfielders in their top 20 prospects? Yes, I do. But that's not the way that drafts work. I mean, teams decide who they think the best player available is. They take that information and kind of combine it, like we said, with the money games, and they make the pick from there. All I'm saying is, at this point, the Nationals are heavily connected to Walker Jenkins. They are heavily considering Walker Jenkins. I think you and I would both agree the Nationals are not, 2 years away or even a year and a half away from competing. So I think they can have a little bit of, diligence with what age range they want to pick. But I would ask you this as kind of a supplement to your question. If you were a scouting director or you were a general manager, maybe specifically the Nationals, who don't have a very good team right now, but they do have a strong farm system that only figures to get stronger, are you of the mindset you take the best player available, or do you take the quantity approach? Basically, would you go quality and just take Skenes for full slot, or would you dabble with quantity and maybe move some money around and get a better player in the 3rd round, for example?
Yeah, so I would just take the best player on my board at this point, even if he cost a little more than slot at number 2. And I would take Wyatt Langford, clearly. That to me, if Dylan Cruz is off the board, Wyatt Langford's my pick. Even if I'm the Nationals, even though I'm 3 years away from winning, I want the best player with the less risk. And I think I get both in Langford. Skenes is like, and we've talked about this a little bit. Skenes, like, I love him. Like, what's not to like, right? It could be, who knows? Maybe he's Justin Verlander. But it's a lot easier to find, really good arms in the draft outside the top 10. It's a lot harder to find quick to the big leagues bats. And when you go out on the market, who you look at? Look what happened this past winter. We saw Xander Bogaerts and Trey Turner and guys like $300 million. So if you're trying to spend on bats, it's going to cost you $300 million in investment. There's a lot of risk to that. No matter what you do to the AAV with an extended contract, 11 years, 12 years, whatever, there's a ton of risk in that. The pitchers these days, even elite pitchers, are not getting those kinds of deals. So I can go out on the market and spend $80 million for 3 years or $120 million for 3 or 4 years to get an elite guy in the prime of his career. But I can't do that with a hitter. It's going to cost me 10, 12 years. So as I'm building a team and I'm thinking about the process, I want to mix risk and the player that I think I'm getting, the upside that I think I'm getting. And that's why I would just take Langford there. If you're a club that thinks Langford is slightly above average instead of a plus to plus player, great. But everything I'm hearing and seeing is he has a chance to play some center field early in his career, a better chance to do that than Dylan Cruz. And he's probably just a half tick off offensively, at least in the power department. And he's relatively close in the hit tool department. That's a really good player. And even if I only get 3 years of average center field out of him, I mean, that's a player I want in my organization. Because what can you do, Joe? Like you get okay, I'm not ready to win and Langford is ready next year already. Like, how does that hurt you?
Not at all.
Like, it doesn't hurt you. You don't need all this to line up like perfect, right? You're just trying to get the best players, and you can do a lot of things getting a guy to the big leagues before your team is ready. You could trade him.
Let me add in one other thing.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. The Nationals fans should understand it doesn't matter if you have 9 outfielders in your top prospect lists. You got James Wood, you got Robert Hassel. Those two look like they're going to be good players.
Mm-hmm.
I will give you that. Elijah Green, are we sure he's a big leaguer? This isn't me.
You can't be, right?
Crushing him.
You can't be sure.
You can't be sure.
But if you wake up in 4 years and all 4 of those guys are above average to plus big leaguers, is it a problem?
Absolutely
are you
not.
wishing
when you're
you could just go trade one of them for a pitcher, right?
That's what I'm saying. When you're competing, let's say 2025 is here. It's July 2025. You're having a better year than you thought. You want to have the best players in your farm system available regardless of position so you can make the trades and the deals necessary to go win a championship. Listen, the Washington Nationals are not going to have the problem of how are we going to fit 8 awesome big league outfielders into this lineup. Oh, the mistakes we made in 2023. That's not going to happen. Like if the Nationals are lucky, James Wood and Robert Hassel will be good big leaguers, and one of the other 7 will turn into a big leaguer. So I think you just take the best player available. If that's Langford, great. You've got an even better shot of having 3 big league quality outfielders in your future. And then all of those other guys you can trade. I look back, now I'm getting on my soapbox. I look back at the Mariners in 2021 when they weren't competitive yet. They were, kind of still in the midst of that rebuild. And they had Mitch Haniger and Jared Kelenic and Kyle Lewis, Taylor Trammell and Julio Rodriguez. And I mean, the list just goes on and on. Zach Deloach, who was the other? Jonathan Clase. Like all of these guys were in their top 15. I've just named off like 7 guys. Mm-hmm. There was a point at the end of 2022 where all of those guys were up. Every one of them. All 7 of them. And still Seattle couldn't field a big league outfielder, a big league left field. Mm-hmm. So
they still had shortcomings because you can't because they're not all going to work
short.
Out. Right.
So just draft the best player available and figure it out later. And if you do have the luxury of having a surplus, go trade for an arm. Go trade for a third baseman. Like there are ways around it.
Yeah, I think Seattle right now would love to have a surplus bat in their system right now. So they can push into the big leagues.
Not even like they traded one.
Right. Yeah, because they really didn't. So Jenkins at 2 is where you have that now. That could go in a couple of different directions. We do know Mike Rizzo's track record. He kind of made his name as a scouting director before he became a general manager. His track record is the big name SEC, ACC type, college arms that throw gas and can miss bats, but he also loves upside. So Jenkins certainly fits in that second bucket here. Number 3, I have Langford going to Detroit. To me, like if I'm Detroit and Washington doesn't take, and Cruz is off the board and Washington doesn't take Langford, I'm giddy here if I'm Detroit, because what are they missing? Healthy, consistent performers. They're still hoping Riley Green, turns it up a notch, but he's been okay. Torkelson, we'll see what happens there. He struggled early. Javier Baez, free agent signing, hasn't really done much. Like that team offensively is terrible. And a guy like Langford could get to the big leagues inside of 2 years. Maybe when their pitching starts to come along, they start to get guys healthy again. And everybody but Rodriguez there, who was a free agent signing, has really struggled. Matt Manning's been hurt. Casey Mai's been hurt. Maybe to get some of those guys back, develop a couple of other young guys to get to the big leagues about the time that Langford arrives and provides some more offense there for him. Because it looks like even though maybe 2 years ago was the first year we thought maybe the Tigers are going to start crawling out of this rebuild, but they're still looking to do that. And it hasn't happened yet. I think like a guy like Langford could help them do that in a year or two.
Yeah, this is going to be one of the more interesting picks for me. I haven't heard the team necessarily connected to anyone, and I think we're so far out that it doesn't really matter. but I think the pick is going to be a bit indicative of where Scott Harris thinks his player development program is, because whether it's pitching, whether it's bats, Detroit has struggled to develop either of them. And we're talking high picks. Riley Green has been pretty good. Spencer Torkelson has really struggled. They had that four-headed monster of Casey Mize and Matt Manning and Tariq School. Like, they had all of those guys. All of them have struggled in some way, shape, or form. So, I think it'll be interesting that, if Langford is gone and Cruz is gone, and you're Scott Harris, do you take Paul Skenes, who Detroit has struggled, like I said, they've struggled to develop pitching, or do you just say, let's take the best player available on our board. Let's take Walker Jenkins. We think that guy's going to hit. We believe in that kid. I know he's a high schooler. I know Detroit fans don't want to see a high schooler, but maybe this is the best route. And I would even throw this in there, man. Like, if Cruz and Langford are gone, it wouldn't stun me to see another college bat continue to move up, like a Kyle Teal or a Jacob Gonzalez here. I think this is where the draft could get really hairy really, really quickly. And, I just, like you said, I think the value of the starting pitching prospect is at least fuzzy right now.
Yeah, it certainly is. And that goes for the pro level and when it comes to the draft. So really quick, before we get to number 4, the Texas Rangers at 4. If Cruz and let's say Skenes goes number 2, or Jenkins goes number 2 to the Nationals, how far does Wyatt Langford fall? Like, if Detroit doesn't take him at 3, does that just make it obvious and easy for the Texas Rangers at 4? Or do you still think they might be able to make a money play there to kind of spread things out a little bit? Because Texas, despite the fact that they have the 4th pick, they don't rank in the top 5 or 10 in available bonus pool money.
No, they don't even rank in the top 15. I mean, they really don't have a second round pick. They don't have a third round pick. And they've already, done the money game song and dance in 2022. So these are precedented waters for Texas. Like, I think I'll say this. I think the Rangers are in such a forced competitive window right now. Maybe they've only got 3 or 4 competitive years with some of the big money deals that they've got. I mean, I would think that if Langford is there, you kind of look at that as this is a guy that could move quick. He could be up in September of 2024, maybe early 2025, and supplement this team quickly. Maybe he replaces Adolis Garcia in 2025 when controllability becomes a concern. So, no, I mean, I can't see Langford falling out of the top 5, but Texas is in a really fortuitous position. They can be pretty creative here at 4.
Yeah, so at 4 in this particular mock, again, this is the rumors edition of the mock draft. You have Kyle Teal going to Virginia. Now, this isn't an uncommon thought process here with Kyle Teal. He's moved up, he's performed. People think he's going to be able to catch. There's some power there. There's hit tool there. There's athleticism there. He's a pretty unique prospect. Is this the ceiling for Teal, or do you think like if Detroit or even Washington decides to play money, that maybe Teal could go 3 or 2?
I definitely think the idea of him going 3 is possible. I would be with as steadfast as the top 3 players are on this board, and with kind of Mike Rizzo's background of either one taking the most upside that falls into his lap, like Brady House and Elijah Green, or 2 taking the big conference pitcher. Like, I think he's going to get either one of those scenarios to fall into his lap. So probably not 2. But yeah, you kind of spelled it out perfectly. Like, Kyle Teal is a very, very unique player in this draft. How often can you find a guy that has the potential to, do we think this kid couldn't do 2020? Like, he could be a 2020 guy and be a solid average catcher behind the plate. And then you're talking about a 5-win player. So when you look at that and you compare that to like a Wyatt Langford, who's going to be in a corner, it's a lot easier and I've said this publicly, it's a lot easier for Kyle Teal to become a 5-win player than it is for a guy like Langford to become a 5-win player. You're essentially asking for 2021 Tyler O'Neill to find a 5-win corner outfielder. Those performances are rare. Kyle Teal doesn't have to do that.
Right. You can play behind the plate. You can do a lot of things. And it's a left-handed bat, which is really cool to have up the middle somewhere, second base, shortstop, and certainly at catcher. Now, a couple of things on Teal real quick. Give me the percentage chances he sticks behind the plate. And I'm just going to remind you the conversation we had before we hit the big red record button. We were talking about catchers that had speed. We were talking about Jason Kendall and Ivan Rodriguez and guys of that nature, Russell Martin, and Kyle Teal falls into that category. I just think it's kind of weird that we didn't plan on this, but we were talking about that before the show, and Kyle Teal is right there at number 4 in your mock draft. So start with the catcher spot. What are his chances to stick there? What's the general consensus there?
I think it's gone up. So I think the camp was a bit split going into the college football or college baseball season. I think it was more of a 50-50 type of a thing. I think most people are in the camp that he's going to catch now. The throwing arm has gotten a little bit better, and the athleticism is still so unbelievably apparent that I think he's in a good place. That being said, like blocking and the hands need to improve a little bit, but some of the fundamental pillars are there for Kyle Teal to catch. Kind of adding in on your point, like I think you can count the amount of catchers that hit 100 home runs and stole 100 bases on one hand, right? Like we talked about, like Kendall, Martin, who's the one I'm forgetting?
Pudge Rodriguez.
Pudge, yeah. So that's 3. I would.
And Kendall actually came up short. He just hit the 75 home runs because he was a guy who never struck out.
Oh, right. So there was so we only had 2.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, I think when you're talking about a guy that could go 100, and be just a solid average defender behind the plate, you never want to throw this label on a kid early, but it's the type of skill set that can take you to heights that not a lot of guys in their big league careers have achieved. I'm sure Real Muto's at 100, but yeah, it's a very, very short list.
He's actually 15 stolen bases short, so he probably gets there at some point next season. Just looking at how many bases he tends to steal, he's at 7 this year, so he's 15 away. It's outside chance he gets there now, but it's still rare to get that combination to get a really athletic catcher who keeps enough of his speed to actually use it on the bases to go with that kind of power. So we just came up with 3, and that's covering 30 years of baseball right there. So it's pretty rare.
Yeah, and the thing that I think excites a lot of guys about Teal is the polish at the plate is it's there. Like he's staying in the zone. He's not chasing. He's hitting everything in the zone. He's hitting for power. This isn't the fast catcher that has huge bat speed and you kind of hope that it all clicks. Like it's all kind of clicking for Kyle Teal right now. And I think that's forcing a lot of people to have the conversation of, if we're looking for a unique prospect, a unique profile that can turn around a lineup, can turn around an organization, Kyle Teal is probably a lot harder to find than Wyatt Langford.
Yeah, it seems like if clubs are convinced Kyle Teal is at least your number 1 catcher, whether he catches 120 games a year or not, probably really isn't all that important. It isn't as important as it used to be anyway, because you can play him at DH a little bit, even if you're in the National League these days. Teams tend to plan for that a little bit better and stop worrying about, hey, my backup catcher started at DH today. The advantage of keeping a bat in the lineup is too great. Yeah, what a fascinating prospect in Kyle Teal, because when the year started, it was like probably a first rounder, but you didn't really know, and now we're talking about him in the top 5. Pretty crazy. Minnesota Twins at 5. This is where Skenes landed in your rumors addition to the mock draft. Is this the floor for Paul Skenes? Is there any chance he gets past the Twins, barring him asking for $15 million or something?
Yeah, I mean, aside from him getting injured, right? This is I'm trying to stay away from the superlatives, but like performance-based, like this is the best college pitcher that we've seen in 20 years. The numbers are gaudy. He's like shattering every record from the last 20 years. He's posting massive innings totals. The stuff isn't dropping. It's only getting better. I just, it's hard to imagine him getting past Minnesota. So yeah, but I don't know. Like, what's your thoughts on Paul Skenes? First of all, let me just ask you this, because we kind of tickled this a little bit, but the dilution of starting pitching at the big league level, unless you think he's a 230 inning horse, which he might be, where are you at philosophically on taking a pitcher this early?
Yeah, I think I would, especially at 5. Like it's a little different for me if I'm if I'm the Pirates or the Nationals, but it's more because who else is on the board. Like if you told me Dylan Cruz and Wyatt Langford weren't in this class, if I'm the Pirates, I strongly consider taking Paul Skenes. I strongly consider taking Kyle Teal if Langford and Cruz aren't in this class. Because it's not really, I'm not as worried about a guy like Paul Skenes performing. I don't know that he's going to be an ace or number one. Is he the next Justin Verlander, or is he more somewhere, just below that? Is he, early career Aaron Nola? Is he
Kluber?
Is he Corey Kluber? Does he peak and then go away? Is it Walker Buehler where, he teases and teases, has a couple of good years, and then we're just not really sure what's going to happen because he got hurt? That's pitching in Major League Baseball these days. And I think I would have a general philosophy of he has to be really special for me to take him really high. And it really just depends on who else is on the board. If I'm Minnesota in this situation, Teal is off the board, Langford's off the board, Jenkins is off the board, Cruz is off the board. To me, this is a no-brainer. I'm taking Paul Skenes here. There's nobody else in this. Even if a guy like, I don't know, let's say Noble Meyer, the Jesuit right-hander, was willing to take, number 8 money to be my number 5, I'm still taking Paul Skenes. I'm not, like, my team right now in Minnesota is the best team in the American League Central. Skenes can be in my rotation by next summer, maybe even before then. I'm not taking any chances on a high school kid at this point. I can win and do some damage in the American League if I put Paul Skenes at the top of my rotation with what Sonny Gray is doing this year and some other things that are going on in Minnesota pitching wise, one of the better pitching staffs in the American League. I take Skenes here in this particular scenario. But again, if you told me Kyle Teal was available, I'd probably take Teal at 5.
Right.
So I would take him. It's just like Langford and Cruz seem to be pretty special, and Kyle Teal is so unique. But other than that, I think it's by far, you remove those 3 guys from the equation, and Skenes is the guy. He might be 1-1 if Langford and Cruz weren't in this draft.
Yeah. Yeah. You kind of look at what the Twins have been able to do for so many years without a legit top of the rotation guy. And they finally have that early on here in 2023 with Sonny Gray. You just kind of look at it, like Jose Barrios was never a 1. Mm-hmm. He was maybe a 2, maybe a low 2. He had some flashes. What Sonny Gray is doing right now is 1 stuff. If you could put Paul Skenes with that, suddenly you should think Minnesota has a massive advantage in the AL Central by having 2 guys that are more than likely going to beat whoever you throw out there on any given night if you're an AL Central team.
And that could push Pablo Lopez to 3, Joe Ryan to 4. I mean, that's
a good rotation.
We talk about how teams get advantages. It's not just at the top, but when you have aces at the top, like the Astros did with Verlander and Cole, they pushed their 3rd best starter, whoever it was at the time. Even if he was a number 2, he was pitching a number 3 spot or the number 4 spot. And the Twins could have a scenario like that. Lopez, Ryan, Sonny Grano, Gray, what's he have, 1 year left on his deal? That might be another reason why the Twins take Paul Skenes, because Sonny Gray is only signed through this season. You're going to bring him back at 33, 34 years old? Maybe, maybe not. This may be Pablo Lopez, Joe Ryan, and Paul Skenes in the future.
Let's be clear. Paul Skenes could pitch for the Twins in 2024.
He's how bad would he be if he made a start for the Twins tomorrow?
Well, if the guy was walking the world and he had huge stuff, then I'd be like, just let him figure the changeup out and throw strikes and repeat, right? He's not walking anybody. He's striking everybody out. The stuff hasn't
79 and 2/3 innings. Yeah.
Yeah.
The most impressive thing is he's going 6 innings a start pretty consistently. I know, and sometimes 7 and 8.
He probably won't pitch a single inning after he gets drafted for good reason, but he'll probably start 2024. I would think he starts it at AA. Mm-hmm. That was going to be what was going to happen with Kumar Rocker, right? Mm-hmm. It didn't happen with the Mets, but it's so advanced. The strikes are there. The stuff is there. I would imagine he starts 2024 at AA, and it wouldn't stun me at all if he's a big leaguer by June.
Right. That's fun if I'm the Twins. This is a scenario where I'm jumping for joy if I'm the Twins. All right, moving along here. The A's at 6, obviously in a big-time rebuild. There's some really interesting names in that system now from some trades they made. There's a couple of really interesting young players on the big league roster. Esteury Ruiz is certainly one of them. You have him taking Jacob Wilson, the shortstop out of Grand Canyon. Now, this is a scenario where I kind of expected, to be honest with you. I expected Max Clark to be here at 6, considering the first 5 picks. But this is a rumor-based mock draft. So tell me about Jacob Wilson and his connection to the A's here.
I don't have any connection between Jacob Wilson and the Athletics. I will say that I just get the feeling Jacob Wilson is going to go higher than a lot of people think. And the Athletics have an old school, traditional, conventional scouting model where they really value a guy that can hit. They look at the projection, they look at the body. I think Jacob Wilson kind of falls in line with a lot of things that Oakland has done in the past. Now, my whole question right now is, Oakland is not going to be a good baseball team until at least 2026. I mean, you would probably agree with that.
Yeah.
They're not good right now, and the farm system isn't particularly strong either. We're not talking about a farm system that looks like the Nationals, for example. So, I don't know where they're going to go with this pick, Jason, to be honest with you. I think Max Clark makes a lot of sense. I think he's a culture setter. He plays with a chip on his shoulder. He would kind of plays like that 1 year that Johnny Damon was in Oakland. Like, that's the type of player that you're getting. But this is as much a guess as it is, anything educated.
Does he remind you of anyone? Like, he's a bigger shortstop, 6'3", 190, 195. He's a right kid. Just turned 21 at the end of March. Yeah, amazingly. And that's a testament to Jason Kendall's athletic ability. He even played a little bit of second base and third base in his career because they were trying to take advantage of his feet. But does he remind you of another middle infielder, another shortstop? Because it sounds like he has the skills to stay there at least for a while.
This is going to date me, man, but baseball has moved so far away from the Jacob Wilson that he doesn't remind me of anyone. I mean, I'm not going to throw this name out there. This person's a Hall of Famer. I'm not comparing him to this person, but like, he's kind of got the Cal Ripken Jr. like starter kit, makes a ton of contact, uses the whole field, big body shortstop who's only going to get bigger. He can shift to third base as he gets older because it's not spectacular at shortstop. The hit tool is immaculate. Like, that's the type of guy from the 90s that I think of, but you would be extremely hard pressed to find anyone in the last 15 years that had the pure bat to ball skills that Jacob Wilson has shown at Grand Canyon. So no, I mean, to answer your question, he really doesn't remind me of anyone, but I think that's what makes the floor so intriguing for someone like me.
Yeah, if you're looking for 6'3", 200-pound-ish shortstops, you got to go back to guys like Ian Desmond and Yunel Escobar and Troy Tulowitzki, and that's going back 10 plus years. So when you have to go back a decade to find that, you're right. It's baseball's kind of left the Jacob Wilsons, behind a little bit. So really interesting there. So we talk about ceiling, we talk about floor. This might be just an opportunity for the A's to get a good quality, relatively high probability player in their system, along with all the other upside they've been chasing the last year or so.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's something to be said about floor too. I think everyone chases the ceiling, but if you just kind of know that you're going to have a 285 hitter who's going to play shortstop and be that guy that has 80 grade makeup off the field, kind of a clubhouse leader, there's a lot of value in that too. And I don't think, everyone gets hung up on the fact that Jacob Wilson doesn't hit the ball hard, yada, yada, yada. I actually disagree with that. I think he does kind of project to hit the ball quite a bit harder as he ages. And drafting that over a guy that, over a high schooler like Max Clark, it might pay dividends long term. The biggest question with Oakland right now, though, unfortunately, the narrative, is where are they going to be playing baseball, and what does ownership really care about in terms of the draft? Because I think they're going to have more say than most teams.
Right. My fear is that the A's go cheap at 6 and dip way down the board and take a somebody who probably doesn't belong in the top 10. A Walker Martin, a Braden Taylor, a Hurston Waldrop, somebody like that. Not that I don't like those players, but leaving talent on the board is one of the biggest mistakes teams do in
Yeah.
the draft. You mentioned Max Clark. You have him going 7 to the Reds. I want to talk about 7 and 8 kind of in tandem. You have Jacob Gonzalez, the shortstop out of Ole Miss, going to the Royals at 8. Max Clark 7 to the Reds. Is there any specific connection here with those two teams, or is this just kind of a philosophical kind of a situation? The Reds are obviously building long-term, the kind of where the A's are, but probably with more talent in their system and at the big league level, maybe a little bit closer to winning or actually at least having a chance to win. And that seems to be the same case for the Royals. You have the Royals taking Jacob Gonzalez, a shortstop. Joe, what are we doing here? They already have Bobby Witt Jr. Why would they take a shortstop?
Yeah, I don't think, Jacob Gonzalez for me isn't a shortstop. And the options that they have on the dirt right now, Michael Garcia and Caden Wallace aren't, Caden Wallace might be a right fielder or a first baseman. I don't think the Royals are particularly deep right now in terms of position player prospects. So I don't have anything on the Royals. I don't have anything on the Reds, but the Reds did like to, they did like Cam Collier last year. They went for the younger, high upside play there with the hit tool. And there's similarities there with Max Clark. And frankly, when you do a mock draft, a lot of times it's just kind of one of those, wow, look how far this guy fell. There's no way I can get him past 7, right? Like he has to go 7. So
right.
I just didn't think
ask
Max
you
was
if
going to get
that's
past
the
there.
floor for Max Clark. And
I think so. Yeah, I've said this before. Like high school talents can be kind of polarizing because there's different things to weigh and everything. But I haven't talked to anyone that thinks Max Clark is anything less than a top 5 or 6 player in this class, and I don't expect him to fall very much further than this.
So Gonzalez at 8. You have Rhett Lauder, the righty out of Wake Forest, going 9, and Noble Meyer going 10. The high school kid, Jesuit high school, going to the Marlins, which is entirely Miami Marlins. Let's be honest. That's something they do. The interesting thing here is where you have Chase Dollander, the Tennessee kid who had a chance at the beginning of the year. There was a little bit of 1-1 buzz with Dollander. So rather than going too deep on Lauder and Meyer here at 9 and 10, tell us about what's happened with Dollander this year at Tennessee. Obviously, he has the velocity, the raw stuff is there. What's happened to him that's pushed him down? Because it sounds like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, anywhere in that range is legitimate. You have him going 12 in this in the rumor addition to Arizona. Tell us about Dollander here.
It's interesting, man. I think everyone has just been sitting and waiting and waiting and waiting. When is it going to click? Like, when is he going to take off? When is he going to dominate? And it's just been the same thing all year. Like, he hasn't been bad by any means, but he's just consistently given up 3 earned runs, 4 earned runs, 3 earned runs, 6 earned runs, 3 earned runs. And the walks have started to mount a little bit. By my count here, he's got 8 starts in a row with at least 2 walks. Half of those he had 3 walks. It's still a dynamic elite arm, 94 strikeouts in 68 innings, but he has not had a staple performance. I mean, he kind of kicked Gonzaga's ass, but in terms of the SEC, he's just kind of, kicked the can down the road a little bit. It's been okay. Mm-hmm. And so I think everyone's just waiting for it to improve, and this stuff isn't so far off metrically from what we saw last year for, this giant proclamation to make sense. So the more I talk to people, the more it kind of seems Rhett Lauder has closed the gap there. And I had a hard time finding a spot that Chase Dollander lands. And I think if you're the Diamondbacks, you got to be absolutely thrilled with him being here on the board at 12.
Boy, Brent Strom is in Arizona. Do people know about Brent Strom yet, Joe? Because I think the people around baseball know about Brent Strom. Spent a lot of time in Houston and was a major key cog in that pitching staff, turning out the Christian Javieres and the Framber Valdezes and maxing out Garrett Cole after the trade and keeping Verlander at the very top of his game. Luis Garcia, Lance McCullers, Hunter Brown still reaping some rewards from Brent Strom. Now he's in Arizona, and look what Kelly and Zach Gallen are doing. They're hitting the peaks of their careers and actually performing the way people thought they could once they hit the big leagues. It's not an accident, and getting getting Dollander there in Arizona, a little scary. Like if I'm the Dodgers, I'm like, all right, the Diamondbacks have something really going here. And if they get some more pitching, they're going to be really dangerous. That's a really interesting pick there at 12.
Yeah, I have a hard time seeing why the Angels would pass over Chase Dollander, but they went with Zach Neto last year. They reached for upside. They reached for just ceiling. So I think the Bryce Eldridge pick at 11 makes a lot of sense just with how they've handled Ohtani and how they've made it work. But yeah, listen, Chase Dollander still has a handful of starts left in his season, and we saw what a handful of starts could do for a guy like Cade Horton last year.
Yep.
It wouldn't surprise me if Dollander quite literally kicks open the door as a top 5, top 6 pick in this draft, but he's got to turn it on at some point. The stuff is still there. He's still 94 to 96 every single night. The slider hasn't been quite as effective, but we know it's in there. He's healthy. Now I think teams just want to see him put it all together.
Yeah. All right. So that's the top 10. We even went to 11, 12. You want to check out the mock draft. It is the top story at futurestarseries.com. Just click into that and check out the rumors edition of the mock draft from Joe Doyle. Now, I want to do one thing, kind of live here. I'm going to throw like Dylan Cruz at 1. I'm going to throw a completely different player in here at number 2. And I'm more interested in what this would do to the rest of the draft. But if you're the Nationals, you do have money in this draft. So you can just take the best player available. But what if the Nationals or even the Tigers not just go for a Kyle Teal? What if this is where a kid like Chase Davis goes at underslot? What kind of impact does that have? Let's say he goes 3 to Detroit or 2 to Washington. It doesn't really matter. What does that do to the rest of the top 10? And what does that do? Let's assign him to Detroit. What does that do for the rest of Detroit's draft? Like the scenarios there that you can kind of build just by thinking about, all right, they're going to save $1 million here, or $1.5 million, taking a kid who probably belonged at 15 or 13 or 20 at number 3, and what they can do the rest of their draft. Tell me about Detroit in this particular situation. Instead of taking Wyatt Langford in this scenario, or instead of taking Paul Skenes at 3, or instead of taking Kyle Teal or Walker Jenkins, they went Chase Davis, who's trending up, but probably not a guy that belongs anywhere near the top 5 on anyone's draft board.
I'll speak just more macro, just because I think this is how the draft is going to end up anyways. The top 10, like if you look at what my top 10 is right now, Skenes, Jenkins, Clark, Teal, Wilson, Gonzalez, Langford, Cruz, Dollander, I bet you I'd put good money that only 6 of those go in the top 10, maybe even 5. The MLB draft is always chaos. I mean, in 2021, maybe it was 2020 now, it's been a while, when Heston Kjerstad went 2 overall. Chaos. It was chaos. The rest of the top 10 went all over the place. Last year, when this might have been 2021 too, I'm getting my years mixed up. When Frank Mazzucato went 7 to the Royals, he was widely regarded a second round type of guy.
Right.
But they went Frank Mazzucato, and their draft exploded because of it. They got so many good players out of that. The Pirates going underslot with Henry Davis at number 1. They got so much talent because of that. I think there's going to have to be a team in the top 5 who just doesn't have a consensus. This guy is so much better than the potential of, like, let's say you're Detroit, like you mentioned. Cruz is off the board, Langford is off the board. Mm-hmm. Maybe they don't believe in Skenes. If they don't believe in Skenes, maybe they don't want to take a high school hitter in Walker Jenkins. And maybe they think the chase rates for Kyle Teal are just too high. Mm-hmm. So they take Chase Davis. The amount of ammunition that they could pull in the second round or comp round A or the third round, it goes a long ways long term. I think the Tigers are close enough to competing now that they're not going to kick the can down the road. Can't believe I said that twice in 10 minutes. But no, yeah, there's going to be some of that. Like there's going to be a pick that stuns everybody.
Yeah, you mentioned the Pirates 2021 taking Davis in round 2 that year. They gave $2.8 million to Anthony Solometo, the left-hander. We like him. We like his long-term future. And that's when they got Bubba Chandler, the two-way kid. In the third round, they gave him $3 million, a first-round talent. So essentially got 3 first-round talents in 3 rounds because they went under slot at number 1. That gave him the opportunity to do that.
They got Braden Bishop in the 11th round, and a lot of people had him a top 100 prospect in the draft. I think they gave him $1 million. So those dollars, they do keep on adding up, and there's a lot of different ways to utilize them as the draft goes on. I will say one last thing, Jacob, I keep looking at Jacob Wilson and the floor of what that player is and the bloodlines. I still think that's a guy that can sneak up and go a little bit higher than people think.
Interesting. Jacob Wilson, shortstop, right?
Shortstop out of Grand Canyon.
But he doesn't stick, right? Like you're pretty sure he wasn't going to stick, right?
I think Jacob Wilson at 27 years old might not play shortstop.
Right. That's what
Gonzalez. I don't think Jacob Gonzalez will play shortstop.
It's funny because back in the Tulowitzki draft, and I'm dating myself. In the Tulowitzki draft, I was like, well, they're taking a guy who's going to play shortstop for 5 years, and then he's going to move to third base. Boy, was I wrong. Great job by Tulowitzki. A healthy Tulowitzki played a really good shortstop for a really long time.
He would have been a Hall of Famer if he just stayed healthy. Fell apart at 29 or 30.
Yeah, he was definitely on the trajectory. All right, Major League Baseball. Let's talk a little Major League Baseball before we go here for a couple of minutes. The trade deadline is still a couple of months away. The draft is 2 months away. The trade deadline is 2.5 months away. But it's always fun to talk about who could be available, who should be available, which teams are going to be selling. Right now, it looks like, Joe, we're looking at the White Sox at 16-29 as we record this, Kansas City at 14-31 as we record this, Oakland at 10-35, Washington at 18-26, Colorado at 19-25. Those look like the only surefire sellers. I think Cincinnati's going to get to the point where they're selling. Maybe San Francisco as well. They're 20-23 right now. I don't think San Diego's ever going to get to a point where they're sellers, no matter what their record is. But if we had to take one team on each side of this, one team that is kind of the first team to flinch and go buy a player, and who that team is that maybe they match up with. Are you? And basically, this is a question of who are you pretty much sure is going to sell, and they're just not going to be able to convince themselves, let alone their own fan base, that they're still in it. And they're going to go out there and maybe be that first team to sell something to one of those contenders. Like the White Sox, to me, might hold on because they're a bigger market club and they don't want to pass that along. But does Kansas City feel that way? Does Oakland feel that way? Does Washington feel that way? Does Colorado feel that way?
Yeah, Colorado is the one that I point to. Colorado is always fighting an uphill battle, having to face the Dodgers and the Giants and the Padres, and this year, the Diamondbacks. To see every one of those teams 13 times and then having to play every other division, of course, I just don't see a situation with the Rockies' currently constructed roster where they're going to be able to survive or even be in a competitive position at the end of June. So I think they could surprise some people and move a CJ Cron. CJ Cron is the guy that I've had circled for quite a while. He is, I believe he's a free agent after this year. There might be a team option involved there, and it's a tiny contract. So there's going to be suitors. He's not having the best year, but I mean, CJ Cron is just raked, and he's hit, he's been a home run bat for the better part of 5, 6, 7 years now. I think there's a lot of teams that could use that sort of just offensive infusion in their lineup. So if there's one team that I circle that actually has pieces to move, that isn't Oakland, that isn't Washington, that isn't, the Royals, the Rockies are probably the next. But I want to throw one other team at you that nobody is talking about as a potential mover, that just throws in the towel early. The San Diego Padres.
I just don't see it. Yeah, I just don't see it. I think the San Diego Padres baffle me, Joe. And I've talked about this a lot locally, but this is an organization that, first of all, AJ Preller's bad at his job. I'm sorry, AJ Preller is bad at his job. He's been there since 2015. He was hired before the 2014 season was over. He's been there since 2015. There were times when they had the best farm system, basically ranked by everybody as the best farm system in baseball. And they've struggled to produce their own so much that it's taken ownership spending $300+ million on multiple players, and then $280 on Xander Bogaerts and a weird extension for you, Darvish. And it's like, I just don't think, I think this organization is too egotistical to sell at the deadline, almost regardless of what their record is. Like if they're 5 games below 500, they're probably sitting there thinking, we just need to get hot. And to be honest with you, at that point, I really don't blame them. Like, I still think the right thing to do is to sell off a couple of pieces like Blake Snell, Josh Hader, but I don't think they're going to do it. I think they're going to stay in this as long as possible. They might sell off a couple of weak pieces, lower pieces. I don't see them selling off Snell. I don't see them selling off Hader. And I certainly don't see them moving like a Jake Cronenworth or anything like that. I just don't. I think this organization's attitude and their personality in the front office and above isn't going to allow them to do it. Otherwise, it would make perfect sense, because I would have brought them up too if I didn't feel that way about their front office and their ownership group.
So here's my thought process, and a reason that I think they could sell off a decent amount. I think they're currently just like 16 million over the luxury tax. And they were over it last year. And I think this is a good opportunity with some of these contracts that are aging to get, at least for 1 year, get under the luxury tax threshold, save your ownership some money, save the draft pick from dropping 10 spots. You know, there are benefits from an ownership perspective where, let's say you move a Blake Snell and save $7 million. You move a Josh Hader and save $5 million. I think there's some other guys in there too. Like, I don't think, Nick Martinez, there are so many weird, bad contracts on this roster. They're paying Eric Hosmer $13 million to hit for the Cubs. I don't get it. And they're doing it for several more years.
Hey, man, that's AJ Preller. I'm telling you, that's AJ Preller for you. Like, I don't really get anything that's going on there in San Diego. But here's the thing. According to Roster Resource via Fangraphs, the estimated luxury tax payroll for the San Diego Padres is just under $275. So they're $42 million.
Okay, I got them way lower.
But this does make a little bit of sense here, because that third threshold is 273. They could trade a player or two and get under the 273 at least. Getting under the 253, can't see that happening, and getting under the 233 is just not possible at this point, unless they're trading Tatis and Manny Machado, and that doesn't make any sense.
So at that point, you're saving the ownership 20% of that $60 million. Basically, you're saving ownership about $12 million and whatever monies you're able to move. So,
and you might actually get a useful prospect or two, in return. Like Blake Snell can get you something, Josh Hader can get you something.
Their farm system is in such a bad place after. I mean, Jackson Merrill is one of my favorite prospects in minor league
Ethan
baseball.
Salas. They got a couple. They're pretty top heavy though. Yeah.
Ethan Salas. I mean, he does kind of look like a generational catcher, but he's 17. Let's not act like he's going to be here before 2027. Let's just let him get here on his own. That being said, some of these deals, like the Juan Soto deal, you're going to owe Juan Soto, who is not performing, $26 million this year. Or $26 million next year, maybe more. You might be able to get a team to trade for Juan Soto for a year and a half of Juan Soto right now, and maybe fix some problems. I don't know. They are just, the Padres are in this so deep that I don't know. Moving some of these pieces,
and you might be getting Juan Soto kind of trending up at the right time. Right leading up to them might make a lot of sense. It's a really good point, Joe. We'll talk more about the trade deadline in future weeks as we get a little closer. Draft, trade deadline, college stuff, minor league stuff. We do a little bit of everything here on the FSS Plus podcast. Joe, appreciate it. We'll talk again next week. I have no idea what we're going to do next week, but we'll always find something always falls in my lap. I think that's the best part about this. Follow Joe at Joe it's Joe Doyle at MILB. That's at Joe Doyle MILB. I'll get it right one of these times. I'm at Prospect Insider. Follow FSS Plus at FSS_Plus. We'll talk to you next week.
So just chill till the next episode.